This message is for every man who's ever stared at a blank screen and asked, why isn't she reaching out? If you've ever refreshed your messages hoping her name would appear. If you've ever hesitated to text first, wondering if your silence might mean more, this is for you. Because what if I told you, her silence is the message, and how you respond to that silence, that determines everything. This isn't just a video, it's a wake-up call. If you're tired of second-guessing, tired of the anxiety, the waiting, the wondering, then listen closely. Silence is not confusion, it's communication. But only the disciplined, the centered, the grounded man can understand what it's really saying. If this hits home, drop a comment below. I don't chase breadcrumbs, because here's the truth. Number point one, her silence is intentional, not always out of malice, but out of curiosity. She wants to see what you do when the script isn't written for you. When the space between texts becomes a test, you think she's forgotten about you. She hasn't. She's watching, observing, not your messages, but your response to the void. Picture this. A man sits alone, rehearsing a text. He writes, deletes, rewrites, he doesn't send it, not because he's strong, but because he's unsure of his worth. And that's what matters, not what you say, but what your silence reveals about you. Are you the storm, or are you drowning in one? When a woman pulls back, it often creates a mirror, not to manipulate, not to punish, but to reflect. Your emotional stability, your strength, your frame. And if her distance breaks you, if silence makes you chase, if being ignored makes you crumble, you were never standing on solid ground to begin with. A man who needs a reply to feel valuable is giving his power away. Subscribe if you're ready to become the version of yourself that no silence can shake. Because that version of you, he's unbothered. Not out of ego, but out of clarity. Imagine, this, two men, same silence. One chases, the other grows. He lifts, he learns, he earns, not to prove something to her, but because he's chosen to build a life that doesn't revolve around being chosen. Because the truth is, the strongest man in the room is the one who stays centered, even when everything around him is uncertain. So next time she goes quiet, ask yourself, is my identity rooted? Or am I waiting for a notification to feel worthy again? She'll notice the shift. She'll sense that something about him is different because he didn't need her to be okay. And that more than any romantic message or apology is what reignites her interest. Not the pursuit, not the apology, but the absence of need. And this is where Stoicism becomes your most powerful weapon. Not because it numbs you, but because it trains you to respond, not react. To observe your emotions without becoming enslaved to them. To feel the urge to reach out, but choose growth instead. To remind yourself that her silence is not rejection, it's redirection. It's an invitation to become the version of you that doesn't flinch when others disappear. Ask yourself this: if she never replies, would your path still matter? Would your goals still stand? Would your day still carry purpose? If the answer is no, then this silence is doing you a favor. It's exposing the cracks in your sense of direction. And before you chase her, fix that. Because the man who wins is not the one who wins her back. It's the one who builds so much in her absence that she questions why she ever left. And maybe she comes back, maybe she doesn't. But by then, you won't need her to, because you'll have built something far more valuable yourself. You'll have gained emotional sovereignty. You'll no longer beg for closure or chase ghosts in your inbox. You'll be grounded, certain, powerful, and that's the kind of man who never waits for a reply to feel worthy. Number 2, she's not yours to fix. When a woman goes silent, some of you assume it's your responsibility to decode her silence, as though it's your duty to soothe a storm you didn't create. And that belief alone is the beginning of your emotional imprisonment. Because the moment you believe her emotional distance is yours to repair, you lose sight of the truth. not. Every silence is your fault, and not every pain is yours to treat. If you live your life constantly trying to heal wounds that aren't yours, you'll burn out and break down in a loop of overgiving, wondering why your efforts never seem to bring peace. She's not a broken puzzle piece waiting to be rearranged into happiness by your validation, kindness, or constant emotional labor. She may be dealing with her own internal chaos, fears, traumas, expectations, confusion, but that doesn't mean it's your job to rescue her from herself. And the belief that if I love her harder, she'll open up again is not only flawed, it's dangerous. It pulls you into the mindset that your worth is measured by how well you can fix someone who hasn't even asked to be saved. Ask yourself, would you expect someone to carry your mental weight while saying nothing in return? Would you want someone to solve your emotional riddles without ever letting them into your mind? Then why are you offering yourself as the solution to someone who hasn't told you there's a problem? This belief that being the good guy means becoming emotionally available 24/7, endlessly patient, forgiving everything, offering attention, affection, and answers without boundaries is the very trap that drains men of their power. Because being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean being emotionally enslaved. There is a difference between being compassionate and being consumed. And when you start feeling like your relationship is a counseling session where your feelings are the ones always held back in favor of fixing hers, you're not in love. You're in emotional debt, and the interest on that loan keeps growing. Every day she pulls away and you chase. Every time she gets distant and you panic. Every moment she shows indifference and you overcompensate with presence. And this is where the red pill truth hurts. Not every woman who pulls away is broken. Some are just not that into you, and instead of admitting that they're not choosing you, they retreat into silence, hoping you get the hint without confrontation. Your instinct to chase that silence, to fill it with gifts, messages, comfort, and effort, only pushes her further away, because deep down, she never needed fixing. She needed space, clarity, or maybe someone else altogether. When your entire identity is built on being needed, the absence of need becomes your enemy. This is where you have to decide, who are you really trying to heal, her or yourself? Because the truth is, a lot of men project their own need for validation through the lens of heroism, thinking if I help her enough, she'll love me. But what you're really saying is, if I sacrifice enough, maybe I'll be chosen. And that's not love, that's survival. That's desperation. That's a man who hasn't realized he's worthy even when he isn't rescuing anyone. Imagine a man constantly texting a woman who hasn't replied in days, sending voice notes, reposting stories that might catch her attention, checking her last scene, overthinking every detail of her silence like it's a mission sent from above. And now, picture that same man channeling that energy into building a business, crafting his body into strength, surrounding himself with other grounded men, and creating a life so full that no one's distance could make him feel empty again. That's not fantasy, that's choice. And that choice begins when you stop believing that a woman's healing is your responsibility. Some of you were taught that masculinity means carrying everything in silence, being the anchor, fixing the cracks, always being there, even when no one's showing up for you. And that's noble, until it becomes self-abandonment. Because the man who fixes everyone and forgets himself ends up resenting the very people he tried to save. You are not her therapist, and even if she cries, withdraws, and runs hot and cold, you are not meant to interpret that as an invitation to do more. Sometimes her silence means she's overwhelmed. Sometimes it means she's distracted. Sometimes it means she's done. And none of those are yours to repair. Your role is not to dissect every mood swing, every passive-aggressive delay in response, every sudden loss of affection like you're solving a case. Because the truth is, the more you try to repair what isn't yours, the more broken you become. Real strength is in knowing when to walk away, not because you're giving up, but because you're respecting yourself enough not to play a role you were never asked to fill. And you might think, but if I don't fix it, I'll lose her. And to that I say, if fixing it is the only way she stays, then she was never staying for you. She was staying for the version of you that gave up his self-respect for her comfort. And when you live like that, she may stick around, but she won't admire you. She won't respect the man who reshaped himself just to avoid conflict. She won't desire the man who becomes emotionally small so that she doesn't feel overwhelmed. You want to be desired? Build yourself into a man who knows how to hold space for someone's growth without making their journey your responsibility. That means when she's quiet, you stay consistent, not in chasing, but in your direction. You show up for yourself so intensely that her presence or absence no longer determines the value of your day. You wake up and hit your schedule. You stay in shape, you meditate, you read, you work, you build. You become the man whose gravity is so powerful that anyone who drifts from you feels it in their chest, not because you begged, but because you became. That's the difference between the man who texts, "Are you okay?" at 2 a.m. and the man who's asleep because he knows his energy is too valuable to waste on someone who isn't communicating clearly. You don't fix her, you fix your attachment to being the fixer. That's the freedom, that's the growth, and that's when she starts to notice you've changed. Not because you're cold, but because you've reclaimed your warmth and stopped pouring it into someone who wasn't holding space for it. When you do that, everything shifts, not just in relationships, but in life, because now you're walking with direction, not desperation, and she may return, she may not. But you'll no longer need her return to feel like a man because you've remembered something more important. You were never meant to rescue her. You were meant to remember yourself. Number 3, she's measuring your value. There is a moment in every relationship where the words stop flowing, where the energy shifts and the silence creeps in. And for most men, this becomes a source of anxiety, confusion, and overthinking. But for the man who understands the language of emotional psychology and presence, this is the most revealing moment of all. Because what you don't realize is that silence is often her way of watching without speaking, of stepping back, not to disappear, but to observe. And what she's observing isn't whether you'll beg or break, it's whether you'll remain centered or collapse into neediness. And that subtle yet powerful test is something few men recognize until it's too late. Because the way you hold yourself in the quiet moments speaks volumes about the depth of your self-worth and your belief in your own value. And while some will argue that this is manipulation, it isn't always malicious. It's often unconscious and instinctive. Just like you want to know if she's genuine, safe, and consistent, she wants to know if you're stable, anchored, and grounded in your masculine essence. And she can't always ask you directly because words can lie, but your energy can't. So she measures your value not by how much you say, but by what you become when nothing is being said. This is where many men reveal their fragility. They panic at the void. They fill it with overextending, long explanations, sudden declarations of love, or jealousy disguised as concern. All the while, she's learning that your value isn't solid. It depends on her mood, her attention, her affection, that without her immediate feedback, your emotional world becomes unstable. And that tells her everything she needs to know, because women are biologically and psychologically drawn to safety, not just physical but emotional. If your sense of direction vanishes the moment she withdraws, she will never fully trust you to lead or stand strong when life gets hard. You need to understand this. The way you respond to distance is how she determines your strength. Imagine 2 men. One gets ghosted for a few days and immediately spirals, calling, messaging, checking social media, replaying every conversation, trying to find what went wrong. The other notices the distance and calmly redirects his focus toward his goals, maintaining his rhythm, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. He knows his identity doesn't hang on her availability. Now, who do you think she'll wonder about more? Who maintains a sense of power and presence even in absence? It's not about playing hard to get, it's about becoming hard to shake. Because value isn't proven through words, but through presence. And presence means the ability to hold frame, even when nothing around you validates it. That's the hardest thing for most men, because we've been taught to chase approval, to fix, to apologize, to explain. And in doing so, we become less of ourselves and more of a reflection of what we think she wants. She can feel that loss of authenticity instantly. Women are tuned into shifts in energy more than shifts in logic. When you start adapting your identity to soothe her uncertainty, you lose the polarity that attracted her in the first place. Instead of reacting to the silence, return to your purpose. Build your structure, refine your mission, because when she pulls away, she's looking to see if your world collapses or if it continues spinning without needing her affirmation to function. This is the point where many relationships either evolve or dissolve, not because of a fight or a betrayal, but because one person realizes the other cannot hold space without falling apart. Emotional containment is one of the rarest and most powerful forms of masculinity. It doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being so rooted in your value that her silence doesn't steal your focus. You maintain your rhythm regardless of the emotional temperature, and when you live like that, you become the man who doesn't just attract women. You attract respect, admiration, and trust. These things cannot be bought or begged for. They are earned by the man who knows how to be still without being passive, strong without being loud, loving without being dependent. Her tests are not always a game. Sometimes they are her way of saying, "Can I trust your silence?" Because in your silence, she hears your stability. In your restraint, she feels your self-worth. In your consistency, she senses your direction. And when she doesn't feel that, she starts to pull away. Not because you're a bad man, but because your value is too fluid, too reactive, too hinged on her choices. And that's a heavy burden for any woman to carry. Even if she likes you, she will start to feel tired of holding both your emotional frame and hers. When that happens, the relationship stops feeling like polarity and starts feeling like responsibility. And no woman wants to mother the man she's trying to respect. See, the most magnetic men aren't always the best looking or the richest. They are the ones who are least affected by emotional storms, not because they don't care, but because they know exactly who they are. Their value is carved not by compliments or attention, but by discipline, focus, and emotional sovereignty. And here's the irony. The more you focus on becoming that man, the more her silence shifts from a test into admiration. She comes back, not because you begged, but because she realizes she's witnessing something rare. A man who doesn't crumble in the absence of affection. A man who doesn't chase love, but commands it through his clarity. A man who has value, because he's valuable, not because he's constantly trying to prove it. That realization changes everything. Because now, you're not competing for her attention. You're choosing whether or not her presence fits the life you're building. And that's when your value becomes undeniable. You're no longer hoping to be chosen. You're choosing who deserves to share your space. Whether she stays or walks, you remain intact, grounded, and unshaken, because you finally learned that her silence was never the problem. Your need for validation was. Step 4. Evolve into the man you're meant to be. She leaves. The messages stop. The calls fade away. And in the quiet that follows, you're left with nothing but memories and unanswered questions. It's in this silence that most men either crumble or awaken. You see, everything you once relied on, her laughter, her presence, her validation, now seems like a distant memory. And that's where your true journey begins. Not in trying, to win her back, but in reclaiming the power and confidence you gave away when you tried to keep her. The truth that few will tell you. The man she regrets leaving isn't the one who begged, pleaded, or tried to convince her. It's the man who disappeared into focus, who immersed himself in discipline and turned his heartbreak into purpose. The man who emerged, stronger, more determined, sculpted by the fire she left behind. And yes, that truth stings. But it's not here to comfort you. It's here to awaken you, to help you realize that becoming the man she regrets leaving isn't about revenge or causing her pain. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't chase validation because his life is already too full, too focused, and too magnetic to revolve around anyone who didn't see his worth. That transformation starts with clarity. The man she left might have been too soft, too emotional, too available, too eager to prove himself instead of simply being. And while he may have loved her with sincerity, he hadn't yet learned how to love himself with strength. The man who learns this, the one who turns heartbreak into hunger, silence into self-reflection, and absence into ambition, becomes someone unforgettable. Not because he's perfect, but because he evolves into something rare, something no apology can bring back once it's gone. Imagine a man who no longer chases closure, but chases greatness instead, who uses every ounce of emotional pain, not for anger, but as rocket fuel for reinvention. He wakes up earlier, he trains harder, he cuts the noise, and builds a discipline so intense that even the silence becomes his ally. And while she wonders if you're thinking of her, you're focused on the version of yourself that never would have settled for being second. You've learned something no book, video, or therapist can teach you. True value doesn't need to be seen. It's silent, unshakable, and never begs to be recognized. And that's when the tables turn. Not because you manipulated them, but because you transformed. When she looks back, she doesn't remember the man who begged. She remembers the man who disappeared and returned unrecognizable. She regrets leaving, not because she lost love, but because she realizes she never truly met the man you were meant to become. This is the real reason why this hits so deeply. Because it's true. Men who rise after heartbreak don't just glow up. They grow through it. They become disciplined in silence, selective in where they invest their energy, and obsessed with alignment. Suddenly, the need to be wanted fades away. Their worth no longer depends on being chosen, but from choosing themselves. And it all starts with questions. What am I tolerating that's holding me back? Who am I becoming when no one is watching? Would I be proud to date myself right now? By answering these questions honestly, you unlock a version of yourself buried beneath fear, attachment, and the need for external validation. Now, alone becomes your strength. It becomes your forge, where you reshape yourself into the kind of man who walks with purpose, clarity, and undeniable presence. This is more than just mindset. It's about evolving in every aspect of your life. Clean your space. Organize your schedule. Cut distractions, digital or otherwise. Commit to a fitness routine, not for revenge, but for resilience. Learn a new skill. Write goals that scare you and execute them with relentless focus. And every time her memory resurfaces, let it remind you of the version of you that needed her to feel worthy. Use that to fuel the man who only needs his mission to feel complete. When you do this, she will notice. Maybe she won't say it, but she'll feel it. The shift, the upgrade, the peace you now radiate. The way you no longer need to prove your value, because you've already become everything she underestimated. Maybe she reaches out. Maybe she doesn't. But by that time, you won't be the same. The real win isn't her coming back. It's that you no longer need her to. Not because you harbor hate, but because you've outgrown her. And even if you still have love for her, it's a love that honors your evolution. It's no longer from a place of need, but from a place of strength and self-respect. Becoming the man she regrets leaving isn't about becoming a better version of yourself for her. It's about becoming the highest version of yourself despite her. And when you live like that, when you wake up every day with clarity, discipline, and purpose, regret stops being something you hope for and becomes just a byproduct of your growth. You won't need her to acknowledge it. You'll see it in the way she lingers on your social media, in the way her friends bring you up, in the awkward way she tries to reconnect. And none of that will move you, because by then you'll know the man she regrets leaving is the man who stopped waiting to be chosen and chose himself instead. Are you ready to transform? I'm putting together the most powerful step-by-step guide to building a better version of yourself, using timeless principles to help you reclaim your power, master your emotions, and attract the kind of life and love you truly deserve. Stay tuned for my upcoming ebook. If you're ready to start this journey, comment Blueprint below and I'll send it to you as soon as it drops. Support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this with a friend who needs to hear it. Because when you help us grow, you help men all over the world rise from silence, confusion, and pain into power, purpose, and presence.